Leaving the European Union would be a jump into a void for the UK. Those are the words of a new group of Conservative MPs fighting to stay within the European Union. Now, it comes as a poll this morning has given the Out campaign a 6-point lead, the highest it's been since the general election. Well, I'm joined now by the former Chancellor. He is, of course, Lord Lawson, now President of the Eurosceptic group Conservatives for Britain. So you've got to counter that argument. Very good morning to you, Lord Lawson.
Good morning, James.
A leap into the void.
It's an extraordinary expression because, of course, it's not a void. It's a place called the world. And we know the world quite well. It's not outer space. And we do an enormous amount of business all over the world. We trade with the world, we invest, they invest in us. We have all manner of links. And indeed, because the European market, sadly, is something of a disaster zone at the moment, our trade with the rest of the world is growing faster.
But we still do the majority of our trade with the European Union.
No, it's not the majority, but it is a lot. But and it only accounts for about 15% of our total economy, because of course a lot of our economy is trade within our own country. But it's we will carry on. I don't know whether you ever have time in your busy life to go shopping, but if you do, you will find goods on the shelves from all over the world. You don't have to be within the European Union to trade with the European Union. That is a complete nonsense. So really the question is, would we do better outside? And I have no doubt that we would, quite apart from the fact that it is primarily a political project. It's not an economic project. Okay. It's one of the reasons why it's no good. It's a political project and a perfectly legitimate one, but it's one whose objective we don't share.
But as, I mean, I've got to throw this at you because, of course, as a poacher turned gamekeeper, as Chancellor, you shadowed the Deutschmark in preparation for trying to join the forerunner of the euro, the exchange rate mechanism. You've changed your view because you then, presumably, you thought it was primarily an economic organisation.
No, I didn't. I'd written that it was a political organisation. But the difference is that when I was shadowing the Deutschmark, I think this is a little bit old hat, but when I was shadowing the Deutschmark, it was a matter of keeping our own currency. What has happened now is there is a monetary union, a currency union, the Eurozone, and this has changed the dynamics totally.
Is there anything that the Prime Minister can bring back from Brussels that would change you and your supporters' mind? We're hearing now that, there's a lot of progress being made. Jean-Claude Juncker saying we think a deal can be done, that perhaps Britain could become, this is further in the rumour mill, Britain could become some kind of second-tier member of the European Union and keep those economic links.
I have read very carefully what David Cameron has asked for in his letter to President Tusk of the European Union. And even, in my judgment, even if he gets 100% of what he's asked for, and it's unlikely he'll get more than 100%, but we shall see. Even if he gets 100% of what he's asked for, it is inconsequential. Just as in 1975, Harold Wilson came back and conned the people of this country into believing he'd secured a fundamental reform when, of course, he hadn't.
So you'll draw parallels with, you think, the plan Mr Cameron has, that can't come back and pump up, inflate what he's got?
I suspect that may be the case, yes. And I don't think the British people will be so keen to be conned a second time.
OK, well, what do you think then also about the nature of the campaign? Now, he's said once the deal, whatever shape that takes, is done. And, of course, technically the Prime Minister says he could still vote against it. That looks pretty unlikely. But within his own cabinet, his own ministers, they will then be free to campaign according to their conscience. But up to this point, we're talking to people like you, not cabinet members who have doubts about membership of the European Union because they're not allowed to speak out yet.
But they are going to be able to speak out, and they will speak out, and that's good and that's healthy. And it's also very important because whatever the result of the referendum, and in my judgment it's likely to be pretty close either way, whatever the result of the referendum, the Conservative Party will need to come together again and carry on governing on a whole range of issues on which it is completely united and which it is necessary for the British people that it should continue to govern once this is over. So David Cameron was very sensible to allow members of cabinet to do their own campaign the way they feel is right. And I believe that it is clear in my mind what is right, and also I think the British people are concerned that the European Union is such a profoundly undemocratic institution. We in this country have an addiction to democracy, and we like to feel that we have self-government, and that's what the immigration issue is about, whether we have control of our own borders.
But just the addiction to democracy, long may it last, is of course all about fairness. And on the issue of fairness, just on what the Prime Minister has allowed, hasn't he given, though, the Euro supporters, the Europhiles, a head start? They're allowed campaign, they're allowed to speak out. We're just about to speak to one of them next.
Yes, I think, I think that perhaps he has, but there are so many bigger issues at stake that I don't want to start arguing about that. It is the future of our country which is at stake, and it is, I have no doubt whatever, that politically and economically, on both fronts, we would do far better outside it. We're a big country. We are the fifth biggest economy in the world. We have a lot of clout, and the idea that we're somehow like Norway or something like that is ludicrous. Anyone who understands an ounce of realpolitik knows that we could do very, very well outside.
But just let me ask you about the leadership of your campaign. You feel it's important that, as we've been discussing here, that the discussion, the argument, the debate is couched, framed mainly by the economy. And you have said in the past you don't want the xenophobes to be seen to be leading the campaign.
No, I think that when it comes to the campaign will be led probably by both a member of the present cabinet and also by some very experienced senior businessmen who know that we would prosper more outside the European Union.
Any names for that member of the cabinet?
You will find out in due course.
What about UKIP? You don't want Nigel Farage involved then?
No, he's doing his own thing. UKIP are doing their own thing, but they have a different perspective from the perspective that we have. And the big issue is who will be designated by the Electoral Commission as the Leave campaign group, and I have no doubt it'll be us.
But could UKIP, give it that xenophobic tinge? Is that your issue?
Look, this is a free country. He is entitled to do his own thing. I disagree with a lot of what he says, but as I say, this is a free country, and long may it remain so.
Well, great to see you, Lord Lawson. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Well, as I was saying there, we just heard from the Eurosceptic side of the debate. Well, a new group, Conservatives for Reform in Europe, has been created to back David Cameron's renegotiations and lead the fight to stay in the EU. I'm joined now by its leader, Nick Herbert. Very good to see you, Mr. Herbert. Listening very closely, I know there, to Lord Lawson. Do you feel, Lord Lawson, I asked him there about, you've been given a head start. Those within your party that disagree with you and think the Prime Minister's not going to get anything worthwhile and we should vote leave, they're not allowed to speak out properly yet.
Well, ministers are not meant to be speaking out, but of course the rest of us can. And the reason that I thought it was so important to start this group is that there are some people in this country who will want to say, let's stay in the European Union regardless. Just as they said, let's join the euro regardless. And I thought they were wrong about that at the time and set up a campaign to say, no, we should not join the euro. That would have been very bad for our economy, but we should stay in the single market. And then there's another group that want to leave, come what may, and for some of them it's their lifelong ambition to leave. But I think there is a very large group of people in the country, and certainly in the Conservative Party, who have no love for the European Union, have some concerns about it actually, about the growth in the regulation and issues like competitiveness, and certainly issues of great public concern like migration that we feel quite strongly must be addressed. So we want reform in the European Union. And provided that there is significant reform, we would then be willing to say, yes, when it comes to the choice, we should stay in. But I don't think we are unconditional supporters of the European Union.
Well,
and that's actually where I think a lot of the public are too.
It's interesting what you're saying there then, because, I suppose the popular view, and you know more about your own party, of course, than I do, is the sense that within the Conservative Party especially, everyone's made up their minds. They're either in or out, whatever the Prime Minister gets. You're actually saying something very different, that there's a lot of your colleagues who are looking very closely at what the Prime Minister brings brings back from Brussels and will vote according to that, because, of course, the Prime Minister hasn't yet said which way he'll go.
Exactly. The Prime Minister has said that he rules nothing out, and that's important. And it's very important that our European partners know that there is a very substantial body of people who want to be in a position to say, yes, we will stay in, but only if we get the vital reforms that we need. And I think that if we do, Britain could be in a very advantageous position, because we would find that we were outside of the Eurozone, and we would be protected from the deeper integration that countries like Germany and France want to do to protect their currency, the euro. That's been a big concern. But we would be in the single market, and that is a market of 500 million people. It's the world's greatest market. And it is a real issue about whether we would have anything like the same kind of advantages for our businesses if we were forced outside.
But you've
that
got to
market.
be prepared to say, given what you've just said, now you've got to be prepared to say to me here that if the Prime Minister doesn't get enough, you'd be prepared to join Lord Lawson.
I said this morning, and I said last year, and many of my colleagues feel the same way, that if the deal was not satisfactory, we would be put in a position where we would be willing to contemplate leaving. And the Prime Minister has said that he rules nothing out. It is important that people understand that. But if we can get this deal and address the issues that people do mind about, like the draw of people from within the European Union in terms of migration, and the Prime Minister said he wants to tackle that by reducing the amount of time that they can...
Would that be a deal breaker? I mean, that is one of the key issues that the public
I think
are going to grab on, the 4-year freeze on benefits. We're hearing that might already be in the bag.
To tackle that kind of issue, I think, would be absolutely fundamental, because it's key to public concern. And I think it would be a very popular move to say, look, we are not going to pay in-work benefits, which can be worth thousands of pounds a year to people that are coming over with having never paid into the system. That would be an issue of fairness, but it would also, I think, help to reduce the pull factor of people coming over from within the European Union. If we can address that, if we can address this issue of the fact that at the moment there's ever closer union is part of the formal ambition of the European Union, the Prime Minister said he wants an agreement that will stop, that Britain will not be committed to ever closer union. If we can get a formal commitment to deregulation and to increase competitiveness.
And what about, just staying with migration, sorry to throw it in there, there's a suggestion in some papers today as well, that the emergency brake on EU migration, EU member state migration, that might be back on the table.
Well, the Prime Minister said he's open-minded about the mechanism, and if there are alternative mechanisms, then they should be looked at, and that will all be part of the process of renegotiation. I think that what I feel, and what I'm sure many people in the country will feel, is what they want is the issue brought back under control. They want to reduce the numbers that are coming from within the EU, and if it is an emergency brake rather than addressing the pull factor, or it's both of those things, then that would be good. It's the package that matters. And remember, those that really want to leave the European Union, they're very quick to say, well, the reforms don't add up to anything. But that's not what our European partners are saying at all. And the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, when he responded to the Prime Minister's initial letter saying, look, this is what we must have, said these are significant and far-reaching reforms, some of which will be very difficult. So this will be a tough negotiation. And my judgment is that if we get broadly the totality of these reforms, which include more of a say for national parliaments as well, which is very important, not only will we have stopped this relentless drive to deeper union and integration, right, we will have actually turned it round as well, and that is particularly important, I think, to our constituents.
I just want to ask you lastly about how the group came about. Has it formed organically and autonomously, or have there been discussions with Number 10? One would suspect that they would not be displeased with this.
No, I don't think they'll be displeased.
This forming.
Of course, I've discussed this with the Prime Minister, and the group wants to support his renegotiation. We're saying that we think he's doing the right thing by promising the referendum. Lots of people said that there would never be a referendum. We wouldn't deliver on that promise. We did. Lots of people said
I've got to ask you, you've discussed it with the Prime Minister.
He did.
Are you then the Prime Minister's instrument? Will you go the way the Prime Minister says, or could you ultimately say, well, OK, Prime Minister, you think you've got enough, we don't?
No, every Conservative Member of Parliament will make up their own mind, and our group will make up its own mind. We've had lots of discussions with Members of Parliament and peers and members of the party more broadly. What they want is a voice for their view, which I think is the view that doesn't say we'll go in stay in come what may, or we'll leave come what may. But actually we want reform. And if there is serious reform in the European Union, then we would be willing to stay. And I think we speak for a lot of people in the party and the country by taking that view.